Sometimes we do things thinking it would just be a harmless and innocent fun, not knowing that the fun we had would become our worst nightmare. I didn't know it would turn out like how it had turned. I didn't even get a warning, but either way, it became my worst nightmare. What have I done? My life just took a drastic turn within a split second. It was supposed to be a great evening in the club. I wonder what I'm going to do now. I would sometimes wonder why marriages get ruined by useless and small things. I mean, why get married if you are going to be insecure and get angry over small things? Even though I regret ever going to that club because it ruined a good and loving thing I had in my life. It took away the only person who had shown me nothing but true love. I would sometimes think to myself how I got here, in the position that I am in right now. I am left with nothing but regrets and sorrows. Lack of emotional connection and support in a marriage can lead you to try find that connection elsewhere. I loved my husband dearly, but I just felt unappreciated and misunderstood in our marriage. As the years went by, he seemed to give me less and less attention. I started to wonder if I made the right decision marrying him. Every year I thought he was going to change, at least for our son. We were emotionally distant while in the same place. He didn't look at me the same way he usually did. I tried to even change the way I looked, went to the gym, and even bought myself some new clothes so he could notice me. Little did I know that he was actually noticing someone else. Sometimes a silly mistake can cost you a lifetime opportunity. Imagine being sued just because of a small cheating mistake. I will never forget that moment in my life. I didn't mean to cheat, but circumstances pushed me to it, and without any warning, I got sued. Worst part is getting sued by someone whom I thought understood me and will spend the rest of my life with. But I guess I was wrong. There were so many ways to punish me or divorce me, but to get sued, I still think that it was an extreme move to sue someone you claim to love. And I would sometimes ask myself if he didn't find me attractive anymore, or maybe he had found someone else better than me. But why not divorce me, or tell me straight in the face that you have lost attraction, or you no longer feel me anymore, because stringing a person along while you know that you no longer feel them or love them anymore hurts more than receiving divorce papers or breakups and not getting any explanation for the separation. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Please help me understand why men do this to us but get angry when we do it to them. Yes, I admit that I cheated, but it was a mistake, and that mistake cost me a lot. If I knew that my small mistake would turn my life upside down like this, I wouldn't have allowed temptations and missteps to get to me, because look where it took me now. I wish I could turn back the hands of time, and undo the mistake that I did. Well, I thought he was not going to find out, but he did, and when he did, it was not nice. I will not put blame on my ex-husband in something that would make him look bad. That means all he did was to love me, support me, and care for me and our family. But guess what I did? I did the cruelest thing a person can ever do. I went outside our marriage and broke the vows I had made in front of the Lord and our families. Though my ex-husband's behavior somehow pushed me to do the disgraceful thing that I did, but I should have avoided it, I had an opportunity to avoid it, but I didn't. It's really not a nice thing trying to fix some things that would have been avoided by only one word with 2 letters. That word was no. As old as I am, I couldn't reprimand myself and avoid everything from happening, but I went with the flow knowing very well that it would destroy and jeopardize my marriage. The pain of having to start over everything from point A. It's really hard starting over, especially when you know that you were the reason why your marriage ended like how it did. Has anyone ever found herself in the same situation as me? If you have, please tell me how you deal with it. Let me confess how my marriage ended because of my stupidity and allowing lust and dissatisfaction ruin the only good thing that I had. I don't even know what had come over me that time. I know I have said a lot, so let me just break you down on everything. I am not expecting to be judged, but rather shower me with advice and guidance. I know someone had gone through what I had been through, so please let me know how you deal with everything. Did you learn your lesson? Because I did learn mine in a very harsh and hard way. I hate myself every day for what I did. I lost a very precious diamond while collecting stones. So my male, 47 husband and I, female, 37, met at one of the Living Legends live performances, which was AI Green's soul concert that was held in Orpheum Theater, LA, in a year 2020. He was sitting on a seat next to mine, so as we listened to the lovely soul music that Mr. Green was performing, we discussed how great he was, and how his songs always find a way to connect to the heart. I mean, even if you were the person who didn't believe in love, but once you listened to AI Green's music, you would think again about finding love. Mike was a very smart, handsome, and funny man to be around. You know, when you just connect with someone on the first day of seeing or meeting them, that was me and Mike. We just clicked, you know. We had a lot in common, and our goals collided. He was that missing piece I've been looking for all those years. That time, we were having a very great night. AI Green was, and still is, my favorite soul and R&B singer. To me, I think he will remain a legend no matter what. So when the concert was done, we went out together, still continuing with our discussions until he asked that we go to the nearest opened restaurant to grab something to eat. So I agreed. We talked a lot about Mr. Green and how his songs always find a way to connect to the soul. We ended up exchanging numbers. I didn't know that I would meet the person I had thought I would spend the rest of my life with at my favorite singer's live concert. Well, we had a very same taste when it came to music. We both loved soul and R&B. I think that was how we just clicked. A day later, he called me saying he was checking in to hear if I had arrived well at home, which was a very great gesture and so sweet of him. I was not even expecting his call anytime soon, but he did call, and I was surprised yet charmed. So he asked to see me when he comes back from his business trip. I couldn't believe that he would go to a night concert while he still had to go on a business trip. When I asked him that, he just replied by saying, "I would miss everything but not AI Green's concerts, especially if they were around LA. I would rather miss my business trip flight than not to attend the Legends live concerts." I didn't expect his answer, but I understood him, so I agreed to see him when he came back, and he promised to check up on me whenever he gets time since he was going to Africa. From that day, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I mean, there was this connection that I felt when I would speak to him. His voice was like a cure to my sickness, you know. I would feel my heart beating fast and getting butterflies whenever he would call me. Was I falling for the guy? Well, I think so. I mean, who wouldn't? His voice alone would make a woman melt, especially his morning voice. I was falling in love with it every single day. We became friends. He would tell me a lot about his future plans and what kind of a woman he wanted in his life. So after a month, he came back and he kept his promise, mind you. I had thought he was going to forget or make a lame excuse, but he didn't. Our first official meetup was great. I got to see him live during the day since the first time we met, and it was at night. And to say he was handsome would be an understatement. You wouldn't see that he was in his 40s already. He was aging so well, like fine wine, though we would talk over video calls, but it wasn't the same as seeing him in front of me, you know. I couldn't even speak more than 3 words with him because I was so glued to his handsomeness, his perfectly shaped face, nicely trimmed mustache, perfect white teeth, and to top it all, he had deep dimples, which made him look sexier. I was really charmed. His dark caramel self was one thing I would find myself staring at him with so much admiration, especially when he smiles or laughs and his one dimple gets visible, and it turns me on. I know it sounds creepy, but I had that thing, that special thing for dark caramel skin people with dimples, either males or females. I just find them beautiful. Especially since I was like caramel without any dimples. I lived my desires to dark caramel people that I am used to. Anyway, our bond grew fonder with each passing day. We first went on dates as friends or people who enjoyed each other's company, which went on for 3.5 months, because I remember the day he told me that he was too old to be playing hide and seek, playing with friends like these. He confessed his feelings for me on the 4th of July. I couldn't believe it, you know. I also had some feelings for the guy, but I got comfortable with the fact that he was not going to make any move on me. So even though we would sometimes kiss here and there, help each other intimately here and there, but I thought that was just going to be it. I mean, I somehow saw myself as a person who was not on his level, or his type of person he would date or even get married to. He was too perfect, and I on the other side had a very bad history when it came to dating. You know, the way Mike was speaking, I was taken back and charmed, mind you. I had just recovered from a very abusive and controlling fiancé, who I thank God every day for taking me out of that relationship because it was bad. Not like bad, but yeah, bad. Because one of my past partners were very toxic and abusive. Luckily, I managed to break through it, while the other one broke off our engagement because I was a very sloppy person. I would make mistakes and sometimes do things that would jeopardize our relationship and somehow feel like I was still in that toxic relationship. So I was somehow scared and not sure about Mike's, my ex-husband, love confession. Not because I didn't feel the same way as him, but because I didn't know if I would be a good partner to him. He even told me that he wanted a life partner, meaning that person was actually looking for someone he would marry and grow old with. And I didn't think I was fit to be in that category, so I told him that I would think about his love proposal. I had a talk with my aunt, who was the one who played a role of being a parent to me ever since both of my parents passed on. My aunt assured me that nothing would happen, even though I had doubts about myself, But she told me to give myself a chance to love again, and this time I should make sure that I do not make mistakes that I did in my past relationships. A day later, I called Mike and asked for a meeting with him. Luckily, he agreed. So we met and talked. Well, more like I talked. I told him about my past failed relationships and my fears, which he actually understood because I didn't expect him to understand, but he surprised me. He told me that no one was perfect, and we all learn from our past mistakes. So in order to move on from our pasts, we have to accept them and learn from them. He said a lot of sweet words that made me believe that I could change. I mean, God had given me another chance to love, so I had to embrace it and be grateful to it. But I guess some things are just meant to be. I was just made to be alone. After our talk, we made our relationship official. We had a lot in common. The chemistry and connection was there, I fell really hard for him. He made me feel enough. Not to mention the way he looked at me. It was like I was the only important and precious thing that existed in his world. He treated me like a queen, spoiling me like a child. Life has been great. I wouldn't say we had problems, but to me he was my lover and also my best friend. We talked about everything and anything, Every moment with him was never a dull moment. It was great. He used to fulfill my desires, give me everything I needed from a man. He supported, and most of all, he understood. I couldn't get him off my head. We chatted every day, and I was actually falling harder for the guy. The attention he would give me was on top of the world. He would always ask if I was still okay. He was really fussy over me in a charming way, though, and I loved the attention he gave me. We went out a lot. He introduced me to his friends and some of his business associates whenever I would accompany him to those business gala dinners, and to some of his employees, including his personal assistant that he was working with. It was truly a great moment for me. He was also everything I needed in a man, and he was very understanding and loving. So I thought I had found the one. The love of my life, but I guess I was wrong. The sex was okay, but mostly he was a 2 times a week vanilla kind of guy. But he indulged me when I wanted to do some more adventurous things, and was generally attentive to what I needed. He rarely initiated, though, which was a bummer for me. But I was so happy and lacked nothing besides the fact that he would go on business trips a lot, but he was going with me if I was available and spoiled me rotten. But look, I messed all that up and went for stones while the diamond was right in front of my eyes. Mike was everything a woman would ask for and more. He was the type of a guy that most women fantasize and dream about. Though like any relationship, we experienced our fair share of ups and downs. However, a small mistake would soon test the strength of our bond in an unexpected way. Though I still think that if some things are not meant for you, they are just not meant to be for you, and love was some of the things that were not meant for me. And that was how I would console myself every day whenever I think of my past and think about how perfect my life was with Mike, but I ruined all that. All because of what? Lust, lack of affection, and greed. Because what I did is called being greedy, I was not enough and grateful for what I already had in my life. Instead, I went out and looked for something that I had thought was better while something better was in front of my eyes. I sometimes would think, what if he leaves me someday and finds someone else better, who would be on his level, and I would be left alone to pick up the broken pieces of my fragile heart. I loved my husband very much, well, more like I still love him, but sometimes love alone is not enough. I'm not a woman who would cheat on her husband, but the way he had distanced himself from me, it made me feel like we were somehow losing connection, or the connection that we once had that disconnected. I felt like I had lost him as a husband, and my child had lost him as a father. It was just too much to handle. One thing about me that I am actually not too proud to reveal is that I was a drinker. I loved drinking, and it made me forget about the problems of the world for a moment. Whenever I would feel overwhelmed and under pressure, I would take a bottle of wine and drink it like I was drinking water. If things get too much, I would take either a brandy or vodka to numb whatever I would be going through at that time. So when I met Mike, I was in the process of fixing my drinking habits, and I didn't reveal my drinking problem to him. Another thing, when I am too intoxicated, I would get high and need pleasure. I mean intimate pleasure. So you see the impact alcohol had on me, and I needed help before I committed myself deeply into relationships. After a year of dating and getting to know each other, plus trying to fix my drinking habit, Mike eventually proposed. I was so happy because with Mike, it was the first relationship that had been a year of dating. He made sure to always make me feel special in every way. You know when someone makes you feel like you are the only important thing in his life, like you are the apple of their eyes. Well, that was what Mike made me feel. He was not ashamed or scared to show off his woman to his either friends or associates. You know, my ex-fiancé proposed when we were 3 months in a relationship, then got married after 2 months. Our marriage ended in our 9th month, imagine, and the other one we only dated for 6 months, then it ended. So I was happy that someone actually took their time to know me on a deeper level before jumping into the marriage step. We gave ourselves 4 months to prepare for our wedding because we were not in any rush, and Mike would tell me that shortcuts do not last in life. Instead, they get shorter. So if we want to commit ourselves to a lifetime journey, we shouldn't be in any rush because everything needs planning and brainstorming before taking action. In order for your thing to be perfect and be what you want, you have to be patient and brainstorm deeply about your goals and objectives, then take action. I first didn't understand what he was talking about because he was speaking in their business language. I was just a bank manager, so I didn't know about any business languages. But as time went by, I got used to it, and it somehow makes you feel like a business person even if you are not. Mike taught me a lot about business and how to approach clients and everything. I will always be grateful for every lesson he has taught me about life in general and the business world. I couldn't get him off my head, we chatted every day, and I was actually falling for the guy. The attention he would give me was on top of the world. He would always ask if I was still okay. He was really fussy over me in a charming way, though, and I loved the attention he gave me. We went out a lot. He introduced me to his friends and his colleagues that he was working with. It was truly a great moment for me. After 4 months, we got married. It was kind of a big wedding, which was not something I had wanted, but nonetheless, it was a great success, and we were both happy. Our families were happy. Mike was the kind of a guy that most girls fantasize or dream to have in their lives, and I had that. We were so much happy and so much in love until we were not. I was so glad that I had chosen to take my aunt's advice and give Mike and myself a chance to be in love. Our love was the most precious thing that had ever happened to me. We had no problems, you know. We were so perfect for each other. Mike was like my pill that I was supposed to take every day. But guess what? I defaulted, and my pill was no longer a use to me because of my carelessness and selfishness. I had always prided myself on my loyalty and commitment to my husband. I had vowed to change and leave my past behind for him. We planned to start our own family, like having children, and the progress was going okay. After 2 months of trying to conceive, I finally got pregnant. The journey was good and sweet because I had support from Mike. He was with me throughout the whole pregnancy journey. I was so full and happy. What else I would have asked for if I had everything like I did? But I guess a human being doesn't get enough. Instead, they go and seek something else. To feel or get enough, but it is never enough, you know? My life was perfect. My husband was supportive, loving, caring. The worst part was he would even sacrifice his business trips for me to have a smooth pregnancy journey. So at 7 months, I started having some abdominal cramps. At that time, I was alone in the house. Mike was at work, and that day he was going to have a very important meeting with a big client, so I didn't want to bother him. Mind you, that time my aunt was in Oklahoma where we were staying before I got married. So it was not to help with anything to call her. I tried being calm and did those breathing exercises that we were always told to do by the doctor. I even tried going around while trying to get a hold of Mike, but he was not answering. I knew I had no choice but to call my aunt. So I called her, hoping that she would say maybe she was on a plane, but I wouldn't be able to wait for 3 hours and some minutes because she was still supposed to take a cab from the airport to here. She told me that she would take the next available flight out from Oklahoma to LA. So while I was waiting for my aunt, I kept trying to call Mike for about 1.5 hours. The pains were very intense. I thought I was going to die at that time. It was not bearable. So after trying my husband for too long, I called an emergency number. It was the only option I had. The emergency number also took some time to send an ambulance because they were busy asking me a lot of questions. As I was waiting for an ambulance, I felt my water breaking, and that was the last straw of everything. I was in pain for almost 4 hours. When the ambulance arrived, luckily it arrived at the same time as my aunt, which was what I was grateful for. So I sent a text message and a voicemail message to my husband, telling him what was happening since he was not answering his phone. And it did hurt me that he was not answering my emergency calls because I know very well that even presidential meetings do not last for 2 or 3 hours. But my husband was in a meeting for 4 hours. When we got to the hospital, I was rushed to an intensive emergency care unit since it was still early to give birth. To say what happened next, I would be lying because I do not remember anything that happened after I was taken to an emergency room and got diagnosed. But I woke up the next day, and when I felt my tummy, it felt flatter than the previous night. That scared me to the core because I had thought I had lost my baby. When I woke up, my husband was the person I saw, which made me kind of angry because I almost died trying to call him and he was not answering his phone. He came with a bouquet, as much as I wanted to be happy for his loving gesture, but I was too angry at him, and I wanted my child. My mind was all over, thinking about what had happened to my baby. Luckily, my aunt came in and I asked her where my baby was. I knew I would have asked Mike, but I didn't even want to look at him at that moment. My aunt told me that my baby was in the neonatal intensive care unit since he was born premature. As my mind was trying to adapt to what my aunt had told me, the doctor came in and told me that my baby's condition was critical at that moment. They had put him on NICU to support his lungs and heart since they were not fully developed, but the child was alive. Those words only made me happy. They made me feel like everything was okay, like I was full and my world was full. My husband was also happy, well excited when he heard the doctor saying the baby was a he. Since we didn't check the gender of the baby, we had wanted it to be a surprise, and he did become a surprise, a very good one at that. I thanked God for saving my baby even today. When I look at him, I see a fighter, my miracle. He became the best thing that had ever happened to me. 2 months later, my baby was out of the NICU, and it was the happiest moment of my life, having to hold your baby in your arms for the first time, because the doctor didn't want us to hold him since he had machinists supporting his lungs. My husband was over the moon. He couldn't get his eyes off our child. I had long forgiven him. I mean, despite the fact that I almost died and almost lost my child, but I had to thank the Lord and Savior for saving both my child and I. That was enough blessings to be grateful for. Since then, I knew that my life was changing for the better. 2 years later, my baby had grown to be the best and strongest boy to live, meaning I had to make sure that I took care of him since he was very naughty. You would find him everywhere and anywhere. My husband enjoyed those moments, having to reprimand him all the time, but I found it tiring. The bond between baby Aya, my son, and my husband was unbreakable and cute. I still don't know what really came over me to destroy such a beautiful thing. I mean, everything to start with. I lacked nothing except for sexual desires, but I had everything a girl would ask for. And what did I do? I destroyed it, and also got ruined in the process. As time went on, Mike had started being the boring person. I couldn't understand what was going on with him because if I would try and address the issue, he would just make an excuse about being under pressure at work. He was no longer spending much time at home. It was like I had become his housemate because in the morning, we would both go to work. Well, more like he would go to work very early in the morning, then I would be left behind and go around 8. And when it was time to knock off, I would be in the house earlier than him, as he had recently started coming back home late at night. Months later, my husband started going to unending business trips. When I asked him what was with the endless business trips, he would tell me that he was covering all those times that he had postponed trips. And it was fortunate that the clients still wanted to work with him after he had postponed their meetings. Okay, I mean, that was understandable, but he was doing it way too much, I would sometimes ask myself if it was still business trips or it was something else that would make him go away for months. He had distanced himself to a point that I would ask myself what I had done wrong, or I would doubt myself and feel like maybe he had found someone better than me on one of his business trips. That was why he was going to them a lot. He was no longer giving me his time and attention anymore. The thought of him cheating on me and finding someone better than me came across my mind, but I would put the thoughts away and console myself by convincing my heart that Mike loved me enough and a lot for him to just cheat on me. I thought he was going to change, I had faith on our relationship and marriage. Things got worse over time. My husband was unstoppable. It was like he had become a new person, But I stayed with the fact that my husband loved me. So the thoughts of him doing something that would somehow ruin our family and our marriage, I would push them at the back of my head. We had found a baby minder because I had also gone back to work, even though Mike wanted me to quit my job and be a housewife, but I couldn't. I loved my job, and it became a very good distraction to not think about what had been going on in our home. What broke me the most was when my child would ask when his daddy would come home, and when we called him, he would sometimes cut off his call when baby Aya was still speaking to him. The child was used to spending most of the time with his father more than me, so if the father changes, what will I tell the child, and how did he think the child would feel? The more my baby would ask for his father, either to video call with him or ask when he was coming back, I would sometimes get angry, not because of the fact that the child was asking for his father, but the fact that Mike had made the child too fond and got clingy with him, and when he was not there, I was the one suffering with Aya's questions and cries. So, one day I had taken baby Aya to Oklahoma to visit my aunt. I had told my aunt about my marriage concerns and troubles, and she suggested that I should bring the baby to her, so I would get enough space and time to fix things with my husband. I appreciated that a lot. It was something I had needed, so I told Mike that I took baby Aya to Oklahoma, and that became a very huge argument. I tried explaining to him why I had taken the child to my aunt's house, but the man of the house wasn't having it. He wanted his child home with him. I just didn't understand his sudden outburst and attention to the child because he had been gone for months without even checking up on a child. Mike would go for a whole week without checking on any of us, and the child would ask about him, so his outburst and sudden care was kind of useless, and it was infuriating me because he would act like the father of the year. While during that year, he was only present in our child's life almost for a quarter of the whole year since he was always working. I begged him to at least try and work out whatever that was going on in our marriage, but he wasn't having it. He wanted his child home. So he spent 2 days not talking to me. I didn't understand why he was acting like that, but I ignored it because I wanted to find the root of our sudden problems. We were so much in love, our family was happy, our home was warm with so much love. Then suddenly he started his endless trips and things changed. So I went shopping for the house, just to clear my head and buy something that would bring back the chemistry and the spark that was there when we first started dating. I had missed my husband so much. I had tried several times to be intimate with him. I would seduce him thinking he would respond, but guess what? He would say, "Not today. I'm tired, maybe some other time." Those were his words whenever I would negotiate intimacy with him. Imagine a wife negotiating for intimacy with her husband. How would that make you feel if you were in my shoes? I would cry every day and night thinking that maybe my husband had lost touch on me. I thought his love for me had vanished. It was a very bitter pill to swallow. I felt like my whole world was crumbling down, I didn't even know where I had gone wrong because I didn't even have a male friend or any friends for that matter. As time went by, I found myself finding solace in a bottle. Wine became my sleeping pill because I wanted to forget what had been happening in my marriage. I tried finding the puzzles that were missing in my home and in my marriage, but I couldn't find it. It was like I was searching for a fish in a desert. So Mike had gone to one of his long business trips, so I was left alone. I had tried for so many times to bring my husband back and to make him at least tell me what had gone wrong in our marriage, because I felt so lost, like I didn't know whether I was going or coming, if our marriage was still on or off, but all my efforts went down the drain because there was not civil talk that we did. One Saturday night, I decided to just go out and let myself lose a little because I had been so cooped up in the house for too long, and it was starting to drive me crazy to be in the house the whole time while my husband was busy enjoying himself wherever he was. I had been so patient with him, thinking he would change and become the person he was before he got married, you know. I had that hope because I would address the issue to him and would just apologize and promise to change. But after some time and years of not getting attention from my husband, I got tired of being an understanding and patient woman. So I started seeking that attention elsewhere, where I felt wanted and appreciated. I went to one of the clubs nearby. I just couldn't stay at the house anymore. As much as I missed my child, but I couldn't fetch him from my aunt's house, I couldn't afford for him to see me breaking down and becoming the mess that I was. I was slowly going back to my old self that I had thought I had left behind and healed from it. But I guess old habits die hard, right? So as I got into the club, I got the vibe that I needed. As a person with no social life or whatsoever, I found myself friends at the club, or must I say drinking buddies. For the first time in a long time, I started to feel great about things. I felt better about myself, better about my stress. Things were coming together. But I was fooling myself. You know, when they say we dance till we drop, that's what I did. The club was a great breakthrough for me at that moment, and I appreciated the friends I had got for making my miserable life more bearable. I got pretty drunk to a point that I started engaging with one of the guys from the club. They had come with their girlfriends, well, some of them, and there was this one who introduced himself as Ethan. He had no partner. I don't know where his partner was, and I didn't care. All I cared about was having fun and dance the whole night. So the guy and I started talking, dancing together. We acted like a couple, kissing here and there. Of which I am not proud of it. It is my biggest regret ever. He was really funny, and he knew how to make a person forget their problems. From that moment we met, there was undeniable chemistry between us. He made me forget that I had a very huge and depressing problem in my house. My husband was depressing me to a point that I was sleeping with wine every night. Ethan and I talked for hours, and I felt more alive than I had ever been in years. The guy was not even handsome as my husband. I was led by lust and craving for affection that my husband was no longer delivering. I love my husband and don't want to cheat, but I take care of myself regularly, a few times a week. And I'm tired of relying on myself for satisfaction. You know, I tried engaging intimacy with my husband, but it seemed like he no longer had interest in me anymore. It had been almost a year since we last got intimate, and when I asked him about it, he would tell me that he liked my body. He would say that he was attracted to me, but he was not giving me any affection. It was difficult for me to have faith, you know. I couldn't stop thinking that he didn't want me because he was getting it elsewhere. As we were talking and laughing, Ethan started telling me sweet things that would make any woman melt. But then I remembered that I was actually a married woman. We spoke more about ourselves. I even mentioned the problems I was facing in my marriage. He was kind and understanding, and he listened to me without judgment. He offered me a shoulder to cry on and a sympathetic ear, something that Mike had failed to do. On that evening, while feeling lonely and neglected, I succumbed to temptation and had a brief affair with a charismatic stranger named Ethan. So while I felt neglected and unappreciated in my marriage, I found myself caught in a moment of weakness. I had met a charming stranger named Ethan, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to be swayed by the excitement of something I had long craved for. I had always been a faithful and loyal partner to Mike. You know, but during my marriage, I had made a regrettable mistake. The guy had asked me to accompany him outside to get some fresh air because the club was packed and there was a little to no space to move. So I went with him outside, as drunk as I was. I remember getting into the guy's car and things went from 0 to 100 pretty fast. 1 minute we were talking, I don't even remember what we talked about, but I remember mentioning my husband and the shame of marriage that I was in. And another minute, our clothes were flying, we did the deed in the car. Would I be sounding cheap if I say I actually enjoyed the intimate moment with the guy? I mean, I hadn't been getting it for a very long time, and having a male person go all over your body like Ethan did, I enjoyed it. Maybe it was because I was drunk, I don't know. I am not a fundy who believed that marriage is sacred, and luckily neither was he. Though I did love my marriage. I just thought my marriage was doomed to failure the longer I went unsatisfied. The rejection was causing mild depression and was really hitting my self-esteem. I have taken to masturbation far more than I should, which I was worried about was going to reduce fulfillment when I would actually have some intimacy. So it was fulfilling for what I was dealing with my husband, but I knew it was temporary. Marriage is good in other areas. I was just lonely. So I thought a lover on the side would actually help my marriage. Do I sound crazy? Oh, and because I was sure it would be asked, he would tell me he was just not in the mood, that it wasn't me and there wasn't anything wrong. He just doesn't need sex that often. I have tried to explore the issue, but I got nowhere. I started thinking that maybe he actually only wanted sex whenever he felt stressed or when his mistress was not giving it to him. I mean, what else would I have thought of? My husband was going to his business trips a lot, and my conscience was telling me that he had found himself a mistress who was satisfying him more than I did. Days later, he, the guy I cheated with, kept checking up on me, on the phone of course, saying he was concerned about me. He had told me that his name was Ethan, and he had been concerned about me after I had told him about my marital problems the other night. It was way different than the way Mike was treating me when we were still dating. Ethan was a very funny guy and very talkative and protective. I would somehow feel safe and protected whenever he was around. I know it was wrong of me since I was a married woman, but he made me feel like a living person and not a corpse or a house furnisher and a workaholic. Ethan was a hot, tanned, muscular guy who was visiting from Cyprus. He was going back to Cyprus in 2 weeks. I found that out after we had gotten freaky. So 2 days later, he texted me and asked if I wanted to meet up at his apartment, with a bunch of winking faces implying we were going to have sex. I hesitated at first, then said yes, because I was bored anyway, and my husband was no longer giving me any satisfaction, but I deleted the texts. I had given him a fake last name. I went over to his apartment. He had an Adidas tracksuit on which showed his muscular, hairy chest, and I felt a tiny bit of regret before that, but when I saw his muscles, any regret just left me. I barely even hesitated to kiss him. Was I acting like a cheap lady? He had that dopamine over me that I was missing, and every moment with him was magical. I loved my husband, but this newfound excitement and admiration was intoxicating. I knew I shouldn't have done this, but the thrill of being desired by someone new was hard to resist. It felt like I was living in another dimension, It was really refreshing. We had an intimate moment. It was amazing, He took me from 0 to cloud 9, something I hadn't got from my husband for a year. He was well endowed, something my husband didn't have. I think we slept on and off for 2 to 3 hours on his bed. He was so primal. The guy was really gifted in every way. He made me do things that I had never thought I would do. My husband's intimate drive was good, but Ethan's was truly out of this world. I wished that it was my husband who was doing all that to me, So later on, I went back home, and to my surprise, I found my husband. I didn't even expect him to be back earlier, because since he had left, he would only call me twice a day, in the morning and at night. That time he didn't even notify me that he would be home. I know I should have felt some kind of regret, but I wasn't, especially not after Ethan had taken me cloud 9, without trying so hard. I loved my husband so very much, but I couldn't deprive myself of a good time when it had availed itself when my husband was absent. I just didn't understand why a person would sell you the funny, charming, and full of adventure side of him when he still needed or wanted you to be in his life, but change when you are finally in his life. It was really hurting me that my husband was treating me and our child the way he was treating us. We, Mike and me, became more like housemates who shared a bedroom and not husband and wife. I needed his time, attention, and affection, but he was too busy for that. I once had thoughts of him cheating on me or committing adultery in our marriage because of the way he was acting. What was hurting the most was that someone else was giving me the attention I had always longed for, the time I needed, and affection, and it was not my husband. Ethan was giving me an adrenaline rush, and he was making me happy. Putting a smile on my face and thinking about him would make me giggle. Even though it didn't last for long, I had my fair share of fun. I don't even remember when was the last time I had felt like that. I was sure that even my soul had a dust of sorrows because I was no longer happy with my husband. Ethan had that effect on me that I couldn't even explain, but it was there. He knew how to appreciate a woman's body. He knew how to fulfill her desires and make sure that she is satisfied in every way possible. I felt really great to feel someone giving you such attention. I couldn't even remember the day I last had an intimate moment with a male person or my husband. He would always come back tired to even touch me. The only thing he managed to do was giving me a perk and baby Aya when he came back from work or going, and that was it. So being with Ethan for a short while was actually a very good feeling and escape for me. I was tired of feeling ignored and unappreciated by my husband, and this handsome Ethan guy was making me feel alive again. The following day, I went back to Ethan's apartment, and we did what we did best, which was getting it down, mind you. I had left my husband at home. I started hanging out a lot with Ethan. He was really a very great distraction, and he made me feel so much alive again. Ethan was so gentle with me. He appreciated and complimented my body in a way that I felt like living my true self. He took me to another planet. I was feeling all sorts of tingles and butterflies inside me. Mike didn't even notice what was happening behind his back. Then later on, I went back home to my husband, and everything felt normal. I had cheated on him, yes, but I felt like nothing had changed, you know. I had expected to be torn apart by regret and loathing, but I wasn't at some point. Obviously, I had vowed to myself that I would never, ever tell him, nor would he find out. And I still felt love for my husband. Oddly enough, I almost felt closer to him. I was so frustrated before sexually, and ever since that time I got that release, I feel like a barrier that had frustrated me about him had just dropped. I wanted to have intimate moments with him more than in the last time we did. I somehow felt guilty about what I had done and wondered if I should confess everything to him or not. But confessing was going to ruin a lot of things and destroy my marriage. It was like I was stuck between a rock and a very hard place, and I didn't even know how to get out of the situation. As much as I loved my husband, but sometimes I find myself feeling particularly lonely and unappreciated. I just didn't know how to feel about what I had done. I almost hated how easy it was for me, how little it seemed to have affected me. I know that what I did was bad, and it would break his heart if he found out. I hate that this didn't tear me apart with guilt, and instead I feel almost no guilt. I hated the fact that cheating on my husband had somehow made me feel better about both myself and him. It wasn't normal, I know, but what would I have done if my husband was not giving me any good time? The only thing he gave it good time was his endless business trips. 2 weeks later, Ethan had gone back home. We had a very steamy and long, intimate session with him. At first, everything was wonderful. The kisses, the caresses, the feeling of doing something forbidden. But in our last encounter, in less than a minute, he and I started having intimate moments. All that happiness, all that pleasure. And joy faded. I came to my senses and realized what I was doing. After that, I felt like my sexual frustrations had been pushed to the side at that time. I didn't have any urges to cheat again. I suppose it was just a one-time thing, which I wanted to keep as a secret until I die. But guess what happened? My husband found out. And to say how he found out, because I had thought I had covered all my tracks thoroughly. Only God knew. About a month later, my husband came back home and asked to speak to me, which came as a shock to me because when I asked to speak to him about our marriage, he would dismiss me and go on business trips. But I gave him a go-ahead to speak, so as he was speaking, my mind would drift to the moments I had with Ethan. Meek suggested that we went for a couples therapy to fix our marriage. He also felt that our family and our marriage was falling apart. I was glad that he had finally realized that and was willing to work on our marriage and bring back the love and spark we once had. I had hope that we would become a happy family again. So one night I went to put on my sexy number, lingerie, to bring back the spark and love in our marriage. I mean, he wanted us to fix our marriage right. But guess what happened? He came to the bedroom, went to take a shower, then he slept. He even snored. It was really heartbreaking because I was trying to fix our marriage so that I would forget about what I was doing with Ethan, but my husband was not even getting the hints of everything I did or was trying to do. I had hoped that he would at least notice every effort that I was putting on our marriage, but I guess I was in it alone. During counseling, I realized that I had been unhappy and felt neglected for a really long time. I raised that issue during our therapy sessions, and he told me that the reason why he had been distant towards me and our child was because he had met someone, well, his personal assistant, and they somehow had an affair of which he greatly regretted. I didn't believe him when he said he was regretting ever cheating on me. So when I asked how long he had been having an affair with his assistant, he just told me that they had been together since baby Aya was a month old. Meaning that all that time, I had thought my husband was going on business. Little did I know that he was actually going on a cheating spree with his assistant. I just couldn't believe him, you know? I didn't even know how to act or what to do. I was completely devastated by his revelation. It was the thing that I was very sensitive about, and he knew that I couldn't sleep with him since I had recently given birth more, especially since I had given birth through C-section and our child was premature. I shattered, and it hurt too much. Yes, I had also cheated, but that was when he showed me that he didn't have any time or affection for me anymore. He wasn't sorry about saying what he did. He was only sorry that it had hurt my feelings. He told me he wanted to try to fix it and be the husband he had always been. At that point, I felt so broken, like I was in an enormous pressure cooker and was just waiting to explode. So I left the session in the middle and ran away. Not because of what he had told me, but because of the fact that he had started his shenanigans while I was going through labor, stitches, pains. The fact that he couldn't wait for me to recover first, so I would be able to satisfy him the way he had wanted to. I know it was very wrong of me to hide such an abomination, and I should have come clean that time at the counselor's office. But I was confused and didn't know what to do. I am usually the strong one, the person who can do anything. I'm tough, and I've had to deal with some shit in my life. But that one I couldn't handle, it was tearing me apart. So I booked a flight to Oklahoma right after I had left the therapist office. Luckily, I got a space on a plane that was going to depart in an hour. I couldn't stay with Mike anymore. On the other hand, the guilt was eating me up. I didn't know how to deal with the situation that we were facing because I was also guilty as he was. But the only difference was that I had waited for him. I was patient with him for a very long time. You know, I stayed faithful to him, hoping that he would change, but he didn't. Up until I couldn't take it anymore. I stayed in Oklahoma for 3 weeks. Mike had been blowing my phone with so many calls and would sometimes call my aunt if he couldn't reach me. As much as I wanted to take drastic decisions regarding what my husband had revealed, I couldn't take any drastic decisions because I told myself that we were both not perfect. I also had my flaws, which I first didn't feel guilty about, but after the bomb that Mikey had revealed, I felt guilty and felt like I was the one to blame for everything, you know. After witnessing Mike's sincere remorse and his unwavering commitment to change, I realized that forgiveness was within reach, so I chose to let go of the anger and pain, choosing instead to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of renewed trust. I knew that the journey to reconciliation would be far from easy, but Mike and I had faced many hurdles, as trust is not easily rebuilt after being broken. But through open communication, therapy, and a shared dedication to our marriage, I knew that I also had to come clean in order to fix what was already broken. So we slowly began to mend the cracks in our relationship, not knowing that my confession and honesty would actually become my downfall. The reason why he cheated was because I couldn't satisfy him in our matrimonial bedroom, and I also cheated because he had created a huge gap and distance between us. I had thought our marriage was over, and thought that maybe he had found someone better than me. Someone who didn't have a shaming past as mine, which later on proved that my intuitions were somehow right. I was just in denial of the situation. Consumed by guilt, I had ended the affair right after Ethan had gone back home and Mike told me that he wanted us to fix our marriage. So I decided to focus on my marriage. Days later, I had gone back to my matrimonial house. Mike looked like a mess. A very handsome mess at that, but things were awkward between us. Even when I would be next to him, I knew all the things that I had done were wrong, but I didn't know how to change them. I just knew that when he would come next to me or sleep next to me made my skin crawl. I thought maybe it had something to do with the fact that I was not being honest with him. It was definitely not that he had cheated, but it was because I was also hiding something from him. Something that would destroy our marriage. We decided to go back to therapy as a family because our child was also affected by everything that was going on in the house, which somehow made him ask questions like, do his parents still love him, or they have abandoned him? My child was too smart for his age, and he had seen what had been happening around him. And the fact that we had neglected him and I sent him to my aunt's house made things worse to his little mind. Surely he felt unloved and unwanted by his own parents, so the therapy that we had taken as a family was somehow going to help us all. So during the session, I had also confessed everything that was in my chest. You know when you say something while shaking, and not knowing what would happen next. That was me, as I was also sharing my issues. I was shaking because I didn't know how Mike would act and what would be the outcome of the session. I mean, therapy sessions are meant to heal, right? But I had doubts that my marriage would recover after everything that had happened. He looked at me with the eyes that would kill, if eyes would kill someone. So he asked what exactly I wanted to tell him because he already knew about the affair I had with Ethan. I got confused as to how he found out, because I had thought I had kept it a secret. I knew there and then that, it was about to go down. I tried explaining to him why I had taken that decision. I mean, if he was a present husband, like how he was when we first started dating, I wouldn't have resorted to finding solace in another man's arms, so he pushed me to him. It wasn't intentional, but the circumstances pushed me to it. Plus, I needed to release some steam since he was not available. The wine became my friend until I went to the club and got pretty much intoxicated because I needed to distract my mind from what was going on in our home. And to think of it, Mike had sold me a newspaper that I wanted to see and made me read his life book on the chapter that would satisfy me and make me fall in love with him. After I was done speaking, I saw Mike's eyes sparkle with tears. You know, when I saw tears running down his face, I knew there and then that I had messed up big and my marriage was not going to survive the bomb that I had dropped. Despite the fact that he had pushed me to go through what had happened, but we were both wrong, and I had expected him to understand that we were both wrong and find a way to get through it as a family, especially as husband and wife, who both committed adultery in their marriage. To my surprise, Mike didn't even want to hear it. He told me that my revelation was way too much for him to handle and didn't think he would recover or we would recover from it. So he suggested moving out of the house until he filed for a divorce. I couldn't believe it when he mentioned divorce. I didn't want my marriage to end like it ended, but I guess if things are not meant for you, they are definitely not for you, no matter how hard you try to hold them down. They will always find a way to slip out of your hand, no matter how tight your hold would be. About a week later, I received divorce documents, and reality kicked in. I knew I had lost my husband, my family, my marriage. I was glad that he had agreed that we co-parent, so baby Aya was not spending much time with me because I still had to fix my alcohol habits that came back when I was under the pressure of my absent husband. So we decided that the child would stay with his father until I had sorted myself out. You know, some things that you thought you were past them sometimes find their way back to you and they either destroy you or build you. So a few months after the divorce was finalized, I received a letter from Mike's lawyer informing me that I was being sued for emotional distress caused by my infidelity. Shocked and confused, I couldn't believe what I was reading. I never thought that my mistake would come back to haunt me in that way. And how come I was the one getting sued for emotional distress while he had also caused me emotional distress, since he also cheated the worst part with his personal assistant? I mean, wasn't that not allowed in business or companies' rules and regulations? As I faced the lawsuit, I realized the gravity of my mistake. The consequences of my actions extended far beyond my own guilt and regret. The trust I had built with Mike was shattered, and our once strong foundation trembled with uncertainty. As the lawsuit progressed, I found myself facing an uphill battle. Mike's lawyer presented a compelling case, emphasizing the emotional turmoil and pain my actions had allegedly caused my ex-husband. My lawyer advised me to settle the case, fearing that the odds were not in their favor. I didn't reveal that I had also cheated, which was why my lawyer had advised me to settle the case. I didn't have any energy and power to fight Mike because he would always find a way to win the battle. I mean, the guy was a businessman, meaning he was well connected. So if he wanted to destroy me, he would have without trying so hard. Feeling cornered and desperate to put the chapter behind me, because it was like we were playing tug-of-war, and I was told to give up, so I reluctantly agreed to a settlement. The financial burden was substantial, but I hoped it would be the final price I had to pay for my mistake. Little did I know that the consequences would extend far beyond the courtroom. In the aftermath of the settlement, I found myself facing financial strain, struggling to maintain my previous lifestyle. The weight of the guilt and regret I had carried made it difficult for me to move forward. I had learnt my lesson the hard way and vowed never to repeat the same mistake again. Months later, I was determined to rebuild my life, so I sought solace in therapy and self-reflection. She acknowledged my flaws, took responsibility for my actions, and worked on healing myself. Slowly but surely, I started to regain my confidence and rebuild my shattered self-esteem. So along my journey of self-discovery, I stumbled upon a passion for helping others who had faced similar struggles. I had become an advocate for personal growth and self-forgiveness. Through writing, speaking engagements, and support groups, I shared my story, reminding others that mistakes do not define their worth and that there is always a chance for redemption. As time passed, I found myself surrounded by a supportive network of friends that I had found during the support group programs and loved ones who admired my resilience. I also discovered that my mistake had become the catalyst for personal growth and a newfound sense of purpose. As much as I would sometimes think of Mike and how much we had gone through to be where we were, more especially when he would bring baby Aya for a visit, I would get some flashbacks of our special moments, our love and everything. But what happened between us opened my eyes and made me look into life with a different kind of eye. You know, when you have found the right path in your life, you end up looking further than where you were looking before. I got into a relationship with Mike while I was also trying to find myself and find my purpose in life. When I got into a relationship with Mike, I had not found any purpose and I had not gotten help regarding my past, so I ended up repeating the same mistakes that I had done in the past. I had thought I had changed because that was what I believed in, and the love that my husband was showing me and the care he made me experience. Somehow I made my own old skeletons inside the box, and when they decided to come out, I saw that I was ignorant, and my ignorance almost cost me myself, my life. My ex-husband, Mike, reached out to me, expressing regret for the lawsuit and the pain it had caused. That time, he had come to the house to bring Aya for a weekend visit. Mind you, it was the first time we had spoken ever since we got divorced. He told me that he had acknowledged that we both had made mistakes during our marriage and had paid the price in different ways. Well, more like I paid the price, but I didn't tell him that. So with a heart full of forgiveness, I accepted his apology and wished him well on his own journey of healing. I also apologized for my part, but it was kind of useless because what was done was the same as what was created. Meaning we had to accept our past, forgive ourselves, and understand that everything that happened was good or bad. So there was no need to hold grudges against someone, because those grudges are the ones that sometimes delay your process of healing and moving on. You know, us as human beings, we need to start learning that everything happens for a reason, and we can't change that. So it is always up to us to either heal and move past it, or we just move past it, hoping that it won't come back in the future to haunt us. Time passed, we were in contact with Mike, so we decided to force and confront our deepest fears and insecurities for the sake of our child, because the awkwardness that was happening between us was somehow getting into him. So we attended counseling sessions again, seeking guidance and understanding. I took full responsibility for my actions, expressing remorse and pleading for forgiveness. So during one of the sessions, Mike was somehow torn between his love for our family, I think, and the pain he felt. He struggled to navigate to his emotions. I know that my story became a testament to the power of self-forgiveness and personal growth. I had learned that even in the face of adversity, it was possible to rise above one's mistakes and find strength in the process. Through my journey, I did not only rebuild my life, but I had also discovered a purpose far greater than I had ever imagined. So as I had told my story, please tell me if what I did to my husband was worth it, or the way I dealt with my husband's absence was good. I don't even know what I should have done to prevent everything, but what is done right. Please help me with techniques of moving forward in case I find love again, so that I would not repeat the same mistakes that I did. I do not need judgments, but guides and advice.